All right, well, welcome. We have a very special guest with us today. We're here for another episode of Beyond the Canvas Conversations with Gamma. I've said it before, Donny, when we named it Beyond the Canvas, we actually didn't even realize we should have that the acronym is also BTC, which is super apt.
Huh,
I know, I know.
accidents
We
happen.
we should have pretended like we were really smart and we meant it, but we didn't. We thought Beyond the Canvas was a nice name because we're sort of talking about beyond the canvas. It speaks
Well,
for
now everybody
itself, you
knows it
know.
wasn't on purpose. You could have just lied and said it was
I
on
know, but
purpose.
it's kind of fun to admit, like happy accidents, happy accidents.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is episode number 14 now, so ticking along. Donny, you and I have had a chat before, an old friend. I've seen you in person, but I know who you are, even though, I'm constantly learning as well about more about who you are and what you do and your background and involvement in the space and whatnot. But let's get you to introduce yourself. So, imagining that people don't know who you are, who is Donny? How did he get into Bitcoin? Why are we even having this discussion? And big welcome, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Donnie. How did I end up here? I was a normal kid, kind of. I did a lot of stuff as a kid, played a lot of sports, played piano, stuff like that. And then I went to school and I got out of school and I was a bartender through school. So I kept being a bartender because I got a philosophy degree. And what do you do with that other than seek further depths in academia, which I found kind of unsavory at the time. I didn't like the way that people behaved and it just seemed disingenuous. So I found the realest place I could think of, which was the bar I was working at. Just continued down the restaurant path for like 25 years or so. And during maybe in the last 5 years of that tenure, which ended 2 years ago now, so like 7 years ago maybe, my ex-girlfriend's ex-boyfriend told me about XRP. I bought some XRP and I was like, what's this guy on about? He thinks it's the future of finance. It's $10,000 a token. I don't really get it. So I did a bunch of reading about what a blockchain was, what a ledger was, why it is or isn't a blockchain, when it's a ledger, and vice versa, and blah blah blah. And I just became obsessed with the concept of tokenizing assets in general, like solving problems that we have potentially, the physical digital connection between the not just items but our identities too, and how we manage reputation and track it and trace it and transfer it from one place to another and blah blah blah. And that led me into Solana NFTs eventually during the early days of Solana NFTs, back when the network barely worked. And I skipped ETH somehow completely. I just missed it. It was people were too cool, knew too much, they had too much money, and I just was like, what am I gonna do here? And when Ordinals was launched, I was like, sounds stupid. 2 weeks later, I read a little more and I was like, okay, cool. I sold everything I owned everywhere else and I moved into the Ordinals ecosystem in March of 2023. And it has been the most enlightening and exciting journey I've ever been on because, well, for a lot of reasons, but I thought Bitcoin was like the ocean. I guess it kind of is, but I just thought it was like something you walk by and you don't appreciate it if you're near it and you don't really need to interact with it. It just was like still there. It was some like boomer coin that always went up a little and everything else either died or went up a lot. And I was just, at that time, I didn't find it interesting. And then once I started digging further into ordinals, I was like, what are all these address types? What's a UTXO? Like, what is it? Like, Bitcoin doesn't know it exists. Like, we know and we can track through it, but like, it can't think about itself. Like, what is this thing? And I just became obsessed with all of its tiny details and minutia, and I'm learning more every day. And every 6 months, I think I was stupid 6 months before, and now I feel like I know everything I need to know, and I'm sure I'll think I'm stupid again in 6 months. So that's how I got here and why I'm here, because I'm constantly interested in new solutions to sometimes problems we didn't even know we had. And watching this network develop from something that has been sat on to something that's like piloted is riveting. Whether it's art or tech or DeFi or even just reading about it, I think it's riveting. That's
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's all interrelated. Obviously, we also need to acknowledge that you're CEO at Femojis, obviously an
oh,
OG
geez.
Ordinals community. So hats off to Sanj and the crew and the team which you're part of, which I'm sure has been part of the journey. It's funny that you got into, call it crypto via XRP. It's not actually
A lot of
uncommon.
people did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, really. I think everyone has their introduction. My introduction was still via Bitcoin, but it was 2017. I dabbled with a lot of shitcoins. I know you and I have had a laugh about and connected over Neo. Like, there's all of these
Yeah.
blockchains.
Right.
There's all of these blockchains where you just learn little bits. And I know it sounds super cliche that all roads lead back to Bitcoin, but it's interesting how that happens, isn't it?
It seems to absorb everyone's interest over some amount of time and a lot of the economic activity that happens on other chains. It just ends up in Bitcoin. Well, I mean, that's been proven more in the last 2 years, and I'm sure will be proven more in the next 5 or 10 or 30 than we even know. But I think we're right about that.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree. I certainly would like to think so. So you said that, when you first read about ordinals, it obviously didn't take you long to become interested in them, that you thought they were stupid. I'd love to, yeah, what did you think was stupid? And then how did you flip that mindset so quickly and then obviously, get so deep into it?
I think at the time it felt like Solana was the solution to every problem because it was fast and cheap, and that made
Hmm.
it, well, now I know that makes it spammable in a way, like that Bitcoin kind of isn't, and it makes it. I didn't realize that NFTs were off-chain pointers. I just didn't. I didn't know that. I mean, not all NFTs, but like most, a dramatic majority of
Yeah.
NFTs are off-chain pointers. I thought that Solana was the solution because it did everything Bitcoin did, but was faster and cheaper. And I was like, why don't we go back to that? Like, cool, somebody decided to carve things into a rock, and why do I care about the rock and not about the oil paintings I now like on the equivalent on Solana? And I just didn't understand what I was doing, so I had these like preconceived notions that were just my premises were wrong, so my conclusions were false. Is basically what happened. So I read a little bit more about why Bitcoin ordinals were cool in my eyes, and what problems they solved with other chains and what new problems they created. And then it just opened a door that I was immediately impressed with.
Yeah, and like you said, how they were solutions to other problems. I know what you mean, but pretend someone doesn't. What do you mean?
I mean that having programmability, like really like being able to do anything with a state aware chain has its downsides. And I don't think it's necessarily that those things happen that they're downsides. The default setting basically is temporary. Everything is treated as temporary. I think one of the worst things about humans is our short time preference. Um, we treat everything as disposable. We buy a phone, we assume we're not going to have that phone in 2 years. We buy like a shirt, we always throw it in the garbage after we wear it once. Like we get a little wine on it. Like we just wash shirts. If you got wine on your shirt, you like washed it, and then you tried to get the wine out because you wanted the shirt. Now everything is like it's just throwaway. And I'm guilty of that in a lot of ways, but I think Bitcoin finds a way to return us to that. And the problems I'm directly referencing are the time preference problems, meaning that if I have a Bitcoin right now, or I have $110,000, I want to get rid of the $110,000. I want to buy property. I want to invest it. I want to do anything but keep the $110,000. But if I have the Bitcoin, I want the Bitcoin. So I'm going to sell as little Bitcoin as I possibly can to afford to buy whatever it is I need, not find ways to spend it. Like we've gotten addicted to spending money because money is hot potato. But Bitcoin's not hot potato. So like when you start translating that into what this network can do, why this network does that, is it because it's why is it good money? Well, it's good money because its database is hard. Its database is unmodifiable for the most part, especially if any single person is running an unpruned node. All of a sudden, the Bitcoin network is full and robust, and everything that's ever happened on it is apparent and there and safe. And if two people run it, even better. If 10,000 people run it, which is what's happening, or more, it's almost indestructible, or as much as we can think something could be as humans, because we're kind of dumb. So if money is good because the database is good, what else is that database good for? And how do we interact with it in a way that solves problems that we at least think we have right now, even if we don't really have those problems? And we realize 5 years later that most of what we were doing was fruitless and just an experiment. Isn't that what we do? Isn't that what like all of civilization ever is? I mean, I think this is a really good example of us just moving into a potentially new era for at least a few people and being able to view life as a little less fleeting and consumerist and something a bit more, I don't know, zoomed out. So I didn't really put that together as I just answering off the cuff, but I think that's what I mean.
No, I actually really appreciate that. It was an interesting point that you made comparing $110,000 of fiat versus owning a Bitcoin, albeit them being the same thing. You view them and you hold them so differently and you look at them so differently.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, civilization has always like grown through experimentation, really trying to find solutions to problems, but that's experiments within themselves. what really, what really stands out to you? What's something that draws you? You said about the patience and time horizons and kind of like hard money. Is that what stands out to you? Obviously, you and I were joking about this off air at the start. There's all this spam debate, filter debate. Like, Bitcoin's kind of always got
Yeah.
Bitcoin itself. Bitcoiners are on a spectrum, and then Bitcoin itself is on a spectrum of kind of like trustlessness and decentralization and
Yeah.
whatnot, like you said, with 10,000 or thousands or tens of thousands of nodes. But yeah, like if you were to explain to someone who really had no idea, what problems is Bitcoin solving right now? And then we're going to get there. We're going to get to like what powers all of this, which is mining, but we'll make that leap when we need to.
It's really difficult to do that. I was just, my landlord called me because his truck died. He's got this light. It's just always, it's like it's a parking light. It just always flips on him. So he wakes up every day and it's just dead for like a week. So we jumped his car. While we were jumping his car because the battery was trickling. He saw one of the parasite miner boxes show up at my door. Like he's seen a few of them come in now. And he's like, so are you like mining or what's the deal with, do you mine Bitcoin up there in the apartment? And I was like, yeah, kind of like it's not super heavy mining. It's kind of casual stuff, but like there's a chance for X, Y, and Z. And he was like, so which coins do you like? Do you buy coins? Do you like coins? Do you want crypto and stuff? He doesn't know that Bitcoin's not a Bitcoin to him, like the word is like Kleenex. It just means tissue. So there are many different kinds of Bitcoin in his perception of this. And he was like, so why would you buy that and not like, how do you know not to buy the other ones? And I was like, that's a great question, dude. I have no idea. Like how I could do it in an hour, you know, but in 5 minutes or in 1 minute, it is money no one can make more of and no one can stop from being transferred. And if you don't see the value in that now, maybe you will at some point in your life, but like when you go to your bank account and you got a $10,000 deposit, now they have to interview you about where it came from. That's a reason enough for me to just want to move completely over to Bitcoin. I was on the phone with my bank for like 30 minutes one time because I got an airdrop, sold it, put it in my bank account and paid my debts. And they were like, what are these payments to Amex and GS Bank and Chase? And I was like, debt? What do you mean? What do you mean are these payments? Why are you asking me? It's my money. It's my bank account. I put it in there. I paid my bills. Like that alone is enough for me to be like, if nobody can tell me not to send Bitcoin to Brett, that's it. That's all I need to know, really. So it was that no one can make more of it, which some people don't understand inflation. So explaining inflation is really difficult in 5 minutes, kind of maybe, and nobody can stop it. So I think those are both the most important parts to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny because it is hard for someone to understand the value of that until they're potentially put in the position where it affects them. And it depends where you're from, and even regardless of where you're from, as soon as you do perhaps run into that kind of issue, that's where you're like, hold on a second, wow, like I'm not really like in charge of my own money, or at least I have to answer to what I do with my own money. It's super fascinating. I actually saw a post this morning. Someone posted a really great reply, which I'm going to refer to. They said, oh, people buy Bitcoin. People something or other about you get the Bitcoin at the price, not at the price you deserve, something or other, but it was like at the price where you understand it. And I was like, oh, I don't actually necessarily agree with that. Like when I bought Bitcoin in 2017, I was like, I didn't really understand it because I'm
But
still
do you still
learning.
have it?
I st- yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Because I'm,
Bitcoin? Do you still have that Bitcoin?
I do wish I had enough.
Yeah,
That was a little
okay.
tiny wincy.
That's good though.
It is good. Yeah, no,
But
I
maybe
have
that's
now.
what they mean. It's like you can buy it and sell it and use it as money, but like you get and
Yeah.
keep the Bitcoin at the price you deserve it at. And I
Yeah, it's
want to do that
interesting
too.
because I was like, do we ever fully understand it? I was like, every day I'm learning. Like I learn from you when we talk about it. And that's funny because like I said, I listen to you. Shout out Block Space Media. Shout out, Charlie Spears and his crew there. I listened to you on the Mining Pod.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Mining Pod, and I loved it. I try and consume as much of that sort of media as I can because, like I said, I'm always learning about it and I find it fascinating. And I got the grasp of what you were saying, and but there's a lot of stuff that you were saying where I'm like, oh wow, like I need to ask Donny, and I'm like, we should talk about it. So I know that that's kind of my segue. There's a lot of things that power Bitcoin. Really, the people power Bitcoin, but obviously, when we're talking about how is Bitcoin created, like what mining is essentially like, like there's a lot of stakeholders that obviously power Bitcoin that give Bitcoin its value, but how the Bitcoin is created, if you like, correct me if I'm wrong, is through mining. And like you said before, you're like, oh, I'm casually mining. It's not like large scale mining. There's kind of this spectrum of mining as well, which I think is
Yeah.
fantastic. And we can touch on mining centralization or decentralization and how it all kind of works. But for the people, and I'll add a little bit more, and I'll ask you, people collect ordinals. My job at Gamma, I've helped numerous artists come to Bitcoin to inscribe their work, and it was actually the first Bitcoin experience they ever had. So it's interesting. A lot of them are involved in crypto, and they've released work on other chains, Sol, ETH, Stacks, you name it, Tezos, which is great. I'm glad that they got into it, and that, hopefully, that's given them some freedom with how they create and how they can sell art to the world. But then, interestingly, like we call it the matriarch or the grandfather of crypto is Bitcoin. They all know it. A lot of them have never actually like owned any, or so
Me, yeah.
yeah, which I think is awesome. But long story short is a lot of people, including myself, because I'm constantly learning, don't really understand how the Bitcoin is created. Why does the way Bitcoin's created also give it the value that it's got? So that's a lot of questions in one.
Yeah. So if I had to summarize that or try to anyway, Bitcoin, all the Bitcoin that is ever going to exist was created when Bitcoin was created, the network, and it is drizzled out of, wherever it's initially held in chunks that scale. You know what the halving is? Should we talk about the halving? Because
Yeah,
maybe
let's
people
do it.
don't know what
Let's
that is.
let's break down all of it.
So
You said the word UTXO before. We'll go through all. I
let's
think
go.
this is let's Eli 5 this.
All right, cool. Let's do it. So the first Bitcoin block happens. All the Bitcoin is created and it lives in the Bitcoin network. And you turn on your computer and you start mining Bitcoin with your CPU, which is just a central processing unit.
Yep,
Central processing unit, is that what that means? In a computer, like a laptop, desktop,
correct.
whatever. At the time, you could mine with a CPU because there was like no one else mining. The hash rate was tiny, and you could actually stand a chance of winning a block. A pretty good chance, actually, especially in the first few days because there was like one person mining. And the initial block reward was 50 Bitcoin, which means that if you guessed the right, to simplify this number, it's not just that easy, but if your miner guesses the right thing, Bitcoin goes, all right, cool, 50 Bitcoin. Here's 50 Bitcoin to you. You are the miner. And in exchange for understanding that or discovering that number, you not only get to take the Coinbase reward, which at that time was 50 Bitcoin for the first 4 years of Bitcoin being around, but you also get to propose which transactions enter the Bitcoin network via that block. And a block is just a page of transactions. And every 10 minutes ish, there is a page of transactions that's submitted to the Bitcoin network as what happened. And it moves to the next page. And then people start filling that out and say, I gave money to Brett, Brett gave money to Nick gave money to whoever. Boom. And it's all there. And then if somebody finds that block, the person that finds the block, they get the block reward, which is 50 Bitcoin at the time, and they get to submit the list of transactions that they think happened then, the transactions that did happen then. The monetary incentive to do this is not just getting the Coinbase reward, but also getting the fees from the transactions that you're including in that block. So you're incentivized as a miner to very efficiently pack as many transactions as you possibly can into this block, because if you're the one who gets the block and your template is what's submitted, you get the block reward and all the fees, which during like the BRC craze was bigger than the block reward for a few blocks. At that point, it was 6.25 Bitcoin too. So like 6.25 Bitcoin plus in fees in some cases, not so long ago, was given to miners who effectively and creatively in some cases compiled these blocks so that they were packed with the most valuable transactions. So as a miner, you get Bitcoin. The only way that Bitcoin comes into circulation is when you mine a block. It is the only way to get Bitcoin until that Bitcoin then drizzles off into centralized exchanges, or if I'm the first person to ever mine a block or one of the first, I could send you Bitcoin directly. But there's no like Bitcoin native marketplace. There's no like DEX on Bitcoin. You can't go in with US dollars and buy Bitcoin from Bitcoin. You have to mine it. It's the only way in. So for the first 4 years, well, the good thing about this mining schedule, this like halving, I think, and I'm sure there are a lot of good things about it, but it gives us a lot of runway for the security budget, which we'll talk about later.
Hmm.
But it also stops people from being able to whale up early and control the entire network, because whenever it becomes worth something, more people jump in to mine. So there's a lot of like weird game theory at play that makes this, I think, one of the most effectively distributed and currently most secure networks on the planet, just because it was super well thought out and it's working the way that it was intended, I think. It's also underwent a lot of upgrades over the course of time, and things have been removed from the protocol and things have been added to the protocol in order to make it different. So the Bitcoin we see today, just to clear this up, is not the Bitcoin that was born in 2009. It's a different Bitcoin, but it incrementally changes, just like when you're sailing a boat over the course of 100 years, you need to replace planks. And even if you replace every plank on that boat, it's still the boat. It's just a better boat and a stronger boat, hopefully, and one that doesn't sink. So after 4 years of 50 Bitcoin block rewards, every block, somebody got 50 Bitcoin for mining a block. The Bitcoin network, after 4 years, roughly, it's a certain number of blocks, but it calculates about 4 years. It's cut in half. So now we have 25 Bitcoin block rewards. And every time somebody mines a block, they get 25 Bitcoin. Sounds like less. But since the price of Bitcoin tends to go up over time more than it goes down, that is actually a higher amount of US dollars, which inclines more people to mine. And then 4 years later, again, it goes down to 12.5 Bitcoin. But that 12.5 Bitcoin, despite being half the amount of Bitcoin, was like 5 or 10 or 50 times the amount of US dollars. So that's still what's happening now, because the 6.25 block reward 2 years ago was like 180 grand, 200 grand maybe, something like that. Now the 3.125 Bitcoin block reward, which is half the Bitcoin, is $350,000. So it's not like the block reward's going down. The amount of new Bitcoin entering circulation is going down. And it goes down on like a schedule that it looks like boxes. It doesn't go down in a linear fashion. It goes down in like a segmented, weird, cuts in half, but trails off for a long time fashion. And over the course of time, you could mine Bitcoin first with CPU. Somebody figured out how to do it with GPU. They took over the network for a few blocks, and other people jumped on with GPU. Eventually, in order to avoid some set of problems that I forgot at the moment, somebody invented ASICs, which are application-specific integrated circuits, I think they're called. And they are chips that do absolutely nothing but mine SHA-256, the algorithm that Bitcoin has adopted. So we now have this, you can't mine from a CPU, you can't mine from a GPU, which is what most people have. You now have to buy dedicated hardware to stand any chance at ever mining a block. And even then, you probably don't have a chance to mine a block, because it's become this very complex industrial organism full of huge Walmart-sized data centers packed with these screaming computers that are the computers have like 300 chips in a box, and each one of those chips is doing over 1 trillion guesses per second at the answer to this problem or the thing that it's trying to guess, So mining has become a very different thing than it was in the early days, and I think it has to, and it should, because otherwise we end up with like Monero, which is just easily attackable because you can only do it with CPU, and thereby only a certain number of people care about it, because it hasn't scaled to the point where it can become industrial. I mean, I guess you could probably make it industrial, but that's a bad example. It's an inevitability that has happened now, and this is where we live. We live in ASIC world now. I don't know what the next step is, but I mean, quantum probably not. Actually, I don't think we're anywhere near that. But we're in the ASICs world now, and now you can mine from home under very specific conditions with very specific, misgivings, I guess, because it's really not profitable for most people, and it depends on a lot of home factors. Do you have any questions about what I just said? Did I skip over something glaring? I mean,
No, I
is that a
love it.
good rundown?
No, I think it's been an awesome rundown. So that's large scale industrial mining. And we said before, and just briefly, you said like these chips, they're guessing at essentially trying to solve an algorithm. That's what that SHA-256 was that
Yeah.
Donny was referring to. Don't even need to know what it is. It's just they're guessing to basically like to guess the correct hash, so to speak, a long string of letters and numbers. And once they get it,
Yeah.
and that, like you said, maybe we should touch on like difficulty adjustment, and like you said, a block confirms roughly every 10 minutes. What a lot, like, it's funny. So again, I like to refer it back when I onboard an artist or a new collector. they're like, oh, I just inscribed my art, I haven't got it yet. And then, even though we may have talked about it, I then explain like, okay, these are how the blocks work.
Blocks
This is
on
like a
block. Yeah, right.
yeah, yeah, this is about this is one of like the beautiful things about Bitcoin is it's like TikTok next block, it's slow. That's like the security part of it.
Right.
Yeah, let's strip it back down to there and then continue
Difficulty
on.
and block time. Got it.
Yeah.
Difficulty adjustments are roughly every 2 weeks. In block terms, it's some number of blocks, which I can't, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's about every 2 weeks. And the network essentially measures the average time that blocks have been found and adjusts the difficulty of the problem or the number to be found in order to adjust for new mining that has been added, new mining power that has been added to the network. So if 10% of the previous mining power has been added over the last week and the difficulty adjustment is upcoming, we can roughly expect for the difficulty to go up 10%. Or if 1% has been added, we expect the difficulty to go up 1%, something like that. Because Bitcoin's goal is to make sure that each block takes about 10 minutes to go by, and that's on average. Because you can't guarantee that a miner who's looking for, or all the miners who are looking for a random solution are going to find it in 10 minutes. You can guarantee that that's probably true over 2 weeks, but you can't guarantee that it's going to happen at the time. So you see blocks that are like 2 seconds between blocks. You see them 10 minutes between blocks. We see 90 minutes between blocks. Because even though there is such a colossal amount of power dedicated to guessing the solution to this number or whatever, you could have everybody guessing only all the wrong numbers until finally somebody guesses the last right number. So, I mean, technically, you could exhaust every possible number being guessed, and nobody ever hits the right number for like, I don't even know what the theoretical maximum is, but it's over 2 hours for sure. It just never quite makes it there because statistically, it's like not possible, really. I mean, it's possible, but it's like it's as possible as an asteroid hitting the Earth dead on and killing us and hitting Manhattan, directly. Um, that's not a real figure. I didn't do the data on that, but
We get the
blocks are
metaphor.
roughly 10 minutes. Yeah, blocks are roughly 10 minutes, but we don't know what they're going to be, if it's going to be like 1 minute or 40 minutes or something like that. And fees are quite variable because of that. Because if there's a 40-minute long block, people imagine like a line at the post office, and the clerk only takes one package every 10 minutes, but it takes them 40 minutes to get to the next one, and you have to pay to stay at the front of the line. So if you paid $1 to send your package and you were going to be in the next line, and then 40 minutes go by, now you're 2 blocks back, you now have to pay $3 to get back up to the front of the line. So it starts these fee battles that push, and this is what the BRC20 minting craze did to us. It started these fee battles that eventually big exchanges started partaking in, where they run automatic consolidations of UTXOs. There's a keyword, we'll talk about that soon. And they will, not even looking at it, they just have these software. It's like software is ready, sitting, waiting to push consolidations to the front of the line. And sometimes that means 100 sats per VByte. It means they have to spend 50 grand to consolidate $80,000 worth of UTXOs, which is absurd. But it's just software doing its job, because normally fees don't spike up to 200 sats per VByte because there's not usually a new meta protocol that opens up that people think is a fun token mechanism. So there's a lot of weird variability with Bitcoin, and the way it deals with fees and traffic and block times is not the same as any other blockchain. And I think that's really important and good. The unpredictability is what makes it good.
Yeah, I agree. It's fascinating. So, like you said, they're trying to consolidate UTXOs. How do you explain UTXOs to people? I know how I do.
It's like pocket change, kind of like if you had 4 quarters in your pocket, you wanted to spend, if you had 100 pennies in your pocket, you wanted to buy a $1 Snickers bar. They may not take that at the gas station, so you have to find a way to go get a dollar bill to spend at the gas station where you want to buy the Snickers bar. So you have to go to the bank, which is Bitcoin in this case, and you have to send 100 pennies into the bank and receive back $1 bill. They're both the same amount, but the $1 bill is in fewer chunks. The way that Bitcoin deals with denominations of currency is it puts them in little pockets of money called UTXOs, which is unspent transaction outputs. And every time you spend, say, a $10 bill, and you need to get $7.50 in change back, that's exactly how Bitcoin works. You could send a UTXO that is a $10 UTXO, and you would, the cashier would split off the $2.50 that's going to its destination and then reroute back to you the $7.50. And you would have a new UTXO that is $7.50. Depending on how you interact and what your wallet software does, you can end up with a lot of UTXOs by accident, or let's say you're running a mint and you're minting 10,000 pieces for $10. Now you have 10,000 individual $10 bills. And when you want to use those, you have to consolidate them. You have to, like, if I wanted to send you $1,000, I would have to consolidate 100 of those UTXOs into one UTXO for you to receive, because otherwise the transaction's too big. Maybe this is where it gets weird, because if I didn't consolidate those, if I had 100 UTXOs of $10 each and I wanted to send them to Brett, I would send them a transaction that has 100 inputs and one output is smaller than a transaction that has 100 inputs and 100 outputs. So you would be spending more money if you didn't consolidate those 100 transactions into one. So basically it is more frugal to do that, but it's stupid to do it when fees are high, because it can cost you more than the amount is worth to do that based on the size of the transaction. Because the more of those UTXOs, the more data you put into a transaction, the bigger it gets, the more the block it takes up, and you have to pay for it. It's kind of like when you mail a package through the USPS again, you have to pay dollars per pound, or if you mail through FedEx or DHL or whatever, typically you pay like dollars per pound and size or something. It's a weight measurement. Bitcoin does the same thing. It's not even raw data size. It's a weight measurement that you're paying for. You're paying sats per V byte, sats per virtual byte, Bitcoin per weight.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great analogy, and also helps artists to understand about optimizing their work and getting the file size down and all of that rigmarole, because the transaction takes up space in the block, like you said, with weight, which is, again, we don't need to go there. Fascinating with this whole.
It's a competition, though.
Yeah,
no, we don't have to go further with that, but it's a competition. And if you want your 100 kilobyte photograph, which is very small, but big in terms of Bitcoin terms, because it has a maximum size per block.
Correct.
If you want that in there, you have to pay to displace the economic value of what would have been there otherwise. And in most cases, you can get more money as a miner by taking a ton of small financial transactions than a big 100 kilobyte image. So you typically have to overpay for that to get it into a block.
Yeah,
Makes
interesting.
it tough.
Fascinating. And then looping back, Bitcoin mining requires energy, which again, I think is a value prop. There we go. Yeah, talk to us about.
It's just my Bitcoin tattoo.
I love it. Show us again. It's nicely done.
And this is funny enough. I got this 13
only.
years ago, and it was a bar I worked at that was cash only, and I was like, "This is probably the last place I'll ever work that's cash only. I got to get a tattoo about it." And it's a dichotomy here.
I love that. That's a brilliant juxtaposition, all in your.
I didn't mean to do it, because this side was already done. I had to do it there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so, to produce Bitcoin, these miners consume a lot of energy, which again I think is a value prop. Yeah, talk to us about the energy consumption, and then on the mining pod you were talking about providing heat and different costs of mining, and depending on where you're based, and there's a lot to this, and then we can kind of talk about this spectrum of mining from these colossal data centers down to I wrote almost a little bit tongue in cheek, but also the truth, like mining from your own bedroom with a bit axe or a nerd Q axe or quacks as you were calling it on that podcast. What does all of this mean? And talk to us about this energy consumption, and why would I decide to even like mine from home? You were talking about like lottery mining. It's a really interesting way to look at it. It was not actually something that I had given a lot of thought to.
There are, because we've all been priced out of Bitcoin mining, so it's no longer a home endeavor. You can still mine through NiceHash. Ethereum, actually, GPU mining was very popular until Ethereum went over to proof of stake.
Yeah.
You can still mine like Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin and BSV, I think, are all still SHA-256, but you can like sort of get away with it. You can do it with a Bitcoin miner, but never mind, scratch that. There's a lot of other stuff you can mine with GPUs, but none of it is worth mining, in my opinion, especially if you have home electricity. But like residential electricity rates are the main constraint.
Yeah.
So I think there were two kinds of miner until Parasite Pool came out, the OMB pool, and now there are three kinds of miner. Still might just be two kinds of miner. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
Let's break it down. And yeah,
Yeah,
hats off and shout out OMB. That's Parasite
yeah,
Pool.
hell
We'll
yeah.
talk about what that even means. What's a pool? But we'll get there.
They did something cool. And okay, yeah, so we're going to go there right now. Industrial mining, like normal commercial big boy mining, where you have thousands of miners in a big place and you have like an energy contract and your own locale and a huge shipping container that you put all this stuff in. Um, that is done usually through a mining pool. If because no one, very few companies are big enough to be their own mining pool. And I'll say this as if you have a container that costs you $200,000 a week in electricity costs because you have thousands of miners in it, um, you don't know if you're going to hit a block because, as we were saying, it's completely random. So you could hit a block first minute, you could hit a block in 10 years. You just don't. You could hit 10 blocks in the last 10 minutes of 10 years, but you don't know if it's going to happen regularly. So somebody has to foot that $200,000 a week bill, right?
Hmm.
That's where FPPS mining or like something pay per share or something like that. I don't know what the acronym is or initialism, but essentially, you point all of your miners at a pool that fabricates the template for you, or you can choose to fabricate the template yourself in some pools. But a pool is basically a way of submitting a template. Some pools also, or I guess putting up your block template if you're a miner. But most pools, specifically like commercial industrial pools, they will give you a percentage of their payouts when anyone in the pool hits a block based on your share of how much hash power you're providing to that pool. So if I'm Donnie and I have a shipping container in the middle of Nebraska somewhere, and I am providing 1% of the hash power to Luxor mining pool, I will get something like 1% of whatever it is they make that week. And every mining pool has different ways of doing this. Sometimes they'll give you a flat payout no matter what happens. Sometimes they'll give you a percentage of what happens minus fees potentially because they have to have fees for running the pool because it's kind of a thankless business otherwise. So most commercial endeavors don't own the mining pool that they're pointed at. They just point it like via F2 pool, Luxor, Ocean, something like that. They find a pool that has their desired payout structure and they go with that. Or an ideological structure in some cases. Usually it's just about payout though. So the first kind of miner is commercial miner, and these are those people who have huge amounts of hash power, gigantic electricity bills, and they're trying to pay them by getting regular payouts. So the pool sometimes will take on the risk of maybe not always making the right amount of money to pay people up, but in the long run, they always do. And they can come out ahead by doing that. They
Are
just
they
have to have
commissioned?
very big, but most of them. Actually, I think all of them at this point have to be because Bitcoin is not smart enough to be able to program to automatically pay out miners. I think with the addition of opcodes CTV and checksig from stack, automated lightning pool payouts would be enabled, but no one's done it. They can't. Um, People do use lightning for payouts because it'll reduce the amount of fees that have to be paid to do that. But I don't think any of them are automated at the moment. I think everything is permissioned. The mining pool could technically choose not to pay you. It'd be a bad business model. You wouldn't be a pool for very long, but they could do it, But they're incentivized currently to be able to pay you out so that you continue mining with them and they can take fees from you. That's kind of like the trade-off. So that first kind of miner is the commercial miner. I think we covered that well enough that it makes
Yeah.
sense, did it? Okay.
Hmm.
The other miner is the home miner. Well, maybe there's a middle ground somewhere where there's like the person who runs two S19s and pays $100 a month or $300 a month in electricity to offset heating their home. So they don't run a heater, they run S19s in their basement. So technically they're paying the electricity to run the S19s, but the Bitcoin they're getting ideally pays for that bill. So maybe they can heat their house for free or they can make a little bit of Bitcoin on the side. Because Bitcoin you get from mining, especially directly, is KYC free. Not you. It's just a miner. It's an address. It's pseudonymous. So trading your payment of an electric bill with USD that you made to getting KYC, un-KYC, non-KYC Bitcoin is kind of like developing a secret war stash of money that no one knows you have and they can't ever trace back to you. That's kind of an interesting concept. There are plenty of people doing stuff like that. They heat their floors with like piping from an immersion miner or whatever. But the real second category of Bitcoin miner I was going to talk about is the solo miner, the home miner, who has expensive electricity at home. Like, I don't know what yours is. Mine's 25 cents per kilowatt hour, which is very high. My mom's is 10 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So she could run two times the miners and pay this same electric bill that I pay. So I don't run very many here. I run a few of my miners in my mother's bathroom because she lives in a cold climate. So I'm like, Mom, got to heat it anyway, right? Turn off the heater. Why don't you run these little home miners, and maybe that'll offset it, and you'll pay the same thing, and maybe we'll make some money, you know? But the solo miner typically, traditionally anyway, you point towards a solo pool, and I know that sounds like an oxymoron kind of, but the pool aspect is just providing a transaction template for you, such that if you do mine a block, you don't have to stare at it all day and try to figure out what transactions go in it, or mine an empty block. You can take their template, which is trusted to be just a maximization of fee revenue, and whenever you mine a block, that's the template that gets submitted. And you say, thanks, pool, for doing that for me, because I didn't feel like doing it and I don't really know how. And in return, not in return, just because you mined it, you get the whole 3.125 Bitcoin plus the fees, which is pretty cool. But your odds of doing that with a BitX Gamma like the one that you have is probably between, well, it's like once every 20 to 40,000 years.
It's
if
still
nothing
in the
changes in the network. Yeah, that one.
We're
It's
going to
even
talk
longer
about
for
it.
that one because it's not
Yeah.
plugged in.
Yeah.
But if it were
This is going to
plugged
take
in,
forever
if
if
that's a
it's still
super,
in the. You can say
it would
it's.
take probably once every 40, like maybe a 1 in 40,000 chance every year that would mine its own block.
Yeah.
If it was a Gamma, it'd be about 1 in 20,000. If it's a Nerdax, you get like 1 in, what is the math? 8,000 chance every year.
Let's
And if
talk
you ran
about why that
8,000,
as well. Like
yeah.
what that even means. Like they push out terahash, or you'll have to explain that to me. That's where I get a little lost. What does that all?
Well,
What
the
are the
Gamma,
measurements? But yeah.
so just wait, solo mining. Solo mining is basically when you're in a pool, but you're not sharing with anybody. So if somebody else in the pool hits a reward, they get their full reward, you don't get anything. And if you
Yep.
hit the block, you get the full reward, they don't get anything. Those are the two categories. There's commercial and solo. And there's some
Makes
gray
sense.
area, and we'll talk about Parasite later. But a BitX Gamma is what's cool about these things. This is a super hex, it's called. This is 6 super chips on one board with a heat sink for cooling, some fans on top, and a little Wi-Fi thing to talk to your Wi-Fi. Well, just imagine that this is a BitX Gamma. That is maybe what you have, just for the sake of argument. The BitX Gamma has one chip, one single chip. I think it comes from an S21 miner, which has hundreds of those little chips. And that one chip puts out 1 terahash per second. And a hash is a guess. Tera means trillion. So 1 trillion guesses per second from that one chip. What does that say? Does it say 401 or 601 on the front of it? The other side.
601.
Oh, that's a Gamma. Cool. So that does put out. Sorry, I have a mosquito racket at my feet because the mosquitoes like to hang out under my desk, and I keep.
Fair enough.
Warm climate stuff. The Gamma puts out 1 terahash, 1 trillion guesses per second. If you are one chip making 1 terahash per second in guesses, there are 20,000. No, I don't even know what the number is. You comprise a percentage of the total hash rate of the network that would yield a random but calculated guess that you would be likely to hit a block once every 20,000 years. Because of the amount of other people who are making guesses, the portion of the amount of people making guesses that you comprise means that your odds are really low. They're still probably higher than the lottery or something like that, but the payout's also lower, and you have to pay the electricity and you have to buy the units. So like, there's a lot of like ifs and buts, but also you get to mess around with Bitcoin. It's fun. Tinkering with these things is fun to do. But the Gamma roughly 1 terahash and once every 20,000 years, just for the sake of argument. It's somewhere around there, which again means a 1 in 20,000 chance every year. So not that bad, especially if you have 20,000 of those, which you wouldn't, because that's crazy. It's about 20 watts, I think, that they eat, which here would cost me like 10 cents. I don't know, some number of cents per day, not a dollar. The Nerd QX++ is 4 Gamma chips on one board. It eats about 80 watts, and here that would cost me 65 cents a day, I think, for a Nerdax. And in my mother's locale, it would cost 25 cents a day. So even the really powerful ones that eat a substantial amount of wattage are really not that expensive. Like, you wouldn't notice it probably on your electric bill. It might, like a Nerdax would probably add $20 a month to my electric bill, which is money, but like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, and ESPN, and all kinds of other dumb stuff. I'm going to avoid swearing. I don't know who's the crowd for this. Stupid
You are
things that
allowed
we
to,
pay
but it's
tons of
all
money
good.
for. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. I'm trying to clean it up a little anyway. Um, so it's like it's pretty marginal until you start saying it is marginal, so I'm going to get another one. And it's just marginal. I'm going to get another
That's
one.
it.
And eventually I had like 1,000 watts of these running under my bed with a cross fan, and my electric bill was like $200 or $300 a month because I just kept on piling these things on, and I was air conditioning the room, fighting the heat that they were producing. So the air conditioner was like running it up at max levels all day, every day. It was just stupid. I was doing dumb stuff. So I've toned it back a little bit, and it's doable anywhere for anyone on a small scale, which is, I think, what's mostly attractive about this. If you're not trying to get payouts every time a block hits from a pool, because if you did that with a gamma, you would get like cents every time. And then in order to consolidate those UTXOs, like we were talking about earlier, spending them becomes almost impossible over short or long time frames, really, because the UTXOs are so small. It's like cents in them. It's like sats. It's like consolidating ordinals or like BRC trash or something. You have to wait until the fee rate is like 0.1, and then it makes sense to financially do it. So solo mining is kind of the only way to go when you're small, and you can't get big enough in your house to make it worth not solo mining. So like these two things are very separate, and there's a pretty big gap between them. And Parasite helps fill some of this gap. We're going to see how that plays out. I don't know what ZK's long-term plans are for that, but it's a new pool. Should I move into Parasite at this point?
Yeah.
Are we skipping anything?
Let's move there in just a tick. So it's like I'm fascinated by it. I've got, I have that home miner. I love Bitcoin, obviously, but I'm speaking on behalf of someone else who's like learning. They're sort of starting. It's like
Theoretical person, yeah.
theoretical person called Brett? No, why? Why would like you talked a little bit about lottery mining, so that might attract some people. So let's list a few things. Like why would someone consider it? Like it could be just fun. That's a reason.
Fun is a good reason. Money is the biggest motivator for everyone
Yeah,
everywhere. And because if you do mine that block, if you're the person who gets it, people do. Several
it's
people
happened.
have in the last year or two. Um, if you do, you get 3.125 Bitcoin plus the transaction fees, which, I mean,
Who
if
knows?
you look at the last block, it was probably like 350K, something like that. It was 357,000 plus $1,000 in fees, 358 grand. So
Yeah,
that's why you would lottery mine. And it's not only is it 358 grand, but like you don't have to tell anyone you got it
yeah,
because it is one of those. It's not KYC. It's not a lottery company. You don't have to report it to anybody. You should probably, depending on where you live or what your laws are.
yeah. Exactly. We're
But
not giving any tax advice or financial advice here, but
no, but like nobody knows where it came from. It came from the Bitcoin
exactly.
network.
Yeah,
That's it. Like that's every miner deals with this. And I mean, in order to it sounds easy to hide stuff, but like in order to turn the Bitcoin into something useful, typically you have to spend it as US dollars, which means
hmm
you have to get it into your bank account. The system that we live under is pretty meticulous about that. So it's not easy to hide, and I wouldn't recommend doing it, but fun to think about. You just got this like tax-free thing, but now you got to go buy something, you got to pay the tax. It's got to
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
But that's,
But that's
I
how
think,
it
a
works.
big part of the motivation is the lottery mining thing.
hmm
And yeah,
What
you could
about the
think
heat in
of
the
it as,
bathroom? The heat in the bathroom's interesting. The heat in the
yeah,
bedroom's interesting. There's these. Again, we don't need to go too deep into the weeds, but there's people who say, "Oh, Bitcoin mining's bad for the environment," blah, blah, blah. But like, there are these really interesting use cases that could be really beneficial for people all around the world. Like I've read about
there's tons.
small mine. Yeah, we could list them. We could talk for ages on it. But I've read about really cold climates like Norway, Iceland, and whatnot. People being able to grow vegetables in greenhouses with heat created from miners. Like there's some really cool stuff. Obviously, more mining is going green. That's on a scale as well. But that's kind of interesting too. Maybe like heating water, heating your room, living in cold climates. On it, there's even different like irrigation and places in Africa.
Man,
We could
you
list
can
them off,
go,
but
oh my
yeah.
God. Some of my favorites are, God, there's so many of them. So if you have flare gas, you have drilled for oil, you found it, there's gas coming out of the ground, you have to burn it because otherwise it's just, well, it's methane. Lots of it is
Yeah.
methane. So you have to burn it, otherwise it's like 30 times worse for the environment. So you just burn
hmm
it. But if you burn it in a combustion engine and then you divert it to mining Bitcoin, you've now made money off of that waste product, especially if the flare gas is stranded or the,
Yeah.
the oil that you found is stranded and you can't pipe it to wherever you need to get it. Now it's just sitting there burning. What are we going to do with it? We have to find a way, like it's better for the environment and for our pockets if we find a way to turn that flare gas into money. So finding stranded energy like that and turning it into Bitcoin is a big up for anybody who wants to do that. It's also like, we don't think about this, but when your city is producing electricity for the grid, they have to overproduce all the time. They can't be like, oh wait, he just turned the air conditioning on. We better crank up the coal fire a little bit or the nuclear power plant or whatever. So they have to always overproduce to make room for whatever might happen. Like if everyone opens their refrigerator at the same time when they get home from work at 5 p.m., it probably happens, Um, but in downtimes, because like a nuclear facility, you can't just like turn it down whenever you want and adapt to these little micro changes. What you can do is have a fleet of Bitcoin miners standing by for whenever there's an overage, just eat it up and turn that into money because the power company needs to sell the power to make sense, right? Otherwise, they can't produce enough power to make enough headroom to make room for those people who like crank their air conditioners all at the same time on the same day every day because we do that. So to stabilize a power grid, the power company can sell power to Bitcoin miners who are willing to shut them off when they need the power back to like, I think it's called a curtailment clause, or maybe there's a lot of other words for something like that. But basically, if I was a Bitcoin miner and I wanted to be like, hey, Puerto Rico, we see that you guys need a lot of energy when everyone's running the AC when they get home from work. And during the day, there's not that much going on or whatever, I'm getting it backwards. But here are the 8 hours a day that you make way more power than you need and you're losing money because you have no one to sell it to. We'll buy it for you from half price. We'll make money out of that as Bitcoin miners. And now Puerto Rico has a stable power grid because they're able to afford to overproduce when they need to overproduce. And when instead we're in a situation where that's not happening, and once in a while a neighborhood just gets shut off because there's too much demand, So you can stabilize a power grid. You can build a power grid. If you are in Kenya, in a village that doesn't yet have electricity, and you have a hydroelectric power plant because there's plenty of those around, you now have an hydroelectric power plant with no infrastructure to be able to deliver to the houses, and no one uses electric devices because they don't have electricity. So what are we even going to do with this? You can plug Bitcoin miners into that hydroelectric power facility. I mean, it would probably take 10 years to bootstrap a grid that way without Bitcoin mining, but you can do it in like a year or 3 if you plug in Bitcoin miners, make money off that, and then use that money to build the infrastructure to get the power to the people in the village. So you can build infrastructure using these like containers that just are kind of mobile of Bitcoin miners. You can trap gas from fermenting garbage and burn the methane, use that for combustion to power miners. You can, oh shit, man. There's a mining documentary called Dirty Coin, which is an incredible watch. If you haven't seen it, it is exploring a lot of the uses. Dirty coin is the joke about Bitcoin being a dirty coin because it's so energy consumptive, which was the false narrative that was going around for a while there. But this debunks a lot of that. It is. Yeah. I don't even know if it's still being talked about. But at the time when this was being talked about, the hash rate has gone up recently. But in like 2021 or 2 or whenever it was like just kind of done making us think about it, Bitcoin globally was using about as much electricity as clothing dryers only in the mainland United States. It's not like a meaningful amount of electricity.
No.
Like do you want to change finance and be able to have the only thing that no one can corrupt? Or do you want to dry your clothes? Right? Like to hang them. What are you talking about? Do something. Stop using a weed whacker. Don't sit in traffic. Move closer to your job. I know there's so many conclusions we can come to other than like this one thing that is the coolest thing we've ever made. We should probably turn it off.
Yeah.
That's stupid. So
it is
I don't
crazy.
know. Get me started on that.
No, look, I completely agree. There's like data around like Christmas tree light usage in the States over like 3 days of Christmas and all that.
Don't get me started.
I know. Merry Christmas.
The holidays. Yeah, right. The holidays. Please,
but
bring it on.
Okay, so back
everybody
to the
kill
home
a tree.
miner.
Put it inside. It's not
exactly.
where it wants to be.
Yeah, that's what we want to do, and then do it again next year. We can home mine, but I need to do something. I need to point it somewhere.
Also home mining.
Yeah.
They don't create a ton of heat. They create enough heat that if you're in a hot climate, it's annoying, and fighting an air conditioner is kind of stupid. I don't like that.
Your mum's bathroom, though.
What's that? Yeah, my mom's bathroom is in the basement of a Buffalo home.
Yeah.
And Buffalo, New York is pretty cold for like 8 months. It's at least chilly 8 months
Yeah.
of the year. It's frigid for 4 of them. Um, so these things can just make the toilet able to be sat on, like whenever you want to go down there and sit on the bathroom toilet.
Yeah.
So she has 4 Nerd axes and 2 Gammas and a Supra. And they're all powered by external aftermarket power supplies, and they have like aftermarket heat sinks on them. They're all overclocked to be able to create, well, make more
Overclocked.
guesses.
You used the word overclocked and underclocked in that podcast.
Yeah. You can
What is
tell a processor how hard to work, and it'll do it. You can also do this with PCs and probably Macs. I've never like jailbroken one of those to do that. But you can basically say, I'm going to give you more electricity, do more work, shout
okay?
louder. It'll reduce the lifespan and create more heat. But the majority, since these things are like ASICs are pretty bulletproof, the rest of the board is maybe the problem. But you can just like go into the firmware settings and type in, I think some of these come with like, I don't know, a 500 megahertz clock setting, which is like a frequency. Um, you can get some of them up to like 1,000. So you can double the hash rate, but you get more than twice as much heat and you need to supply more power. And
Yeah.
sometimes the stock power supply can't do that. So those two things, you need to be able to disperse more heat and provide more power. Sometimes it becomes not worth doing, but if you're bananas and you want your mother to have 4 Nerd axes that are as powerful as 6 Nerd axes altogether, or 7 maybe, because the footprint physically is smaller, but it creates enough heat to make the bathroom warm, then it's worth buying an aftermarket heatsink and a new power supply to power all 4, which is what I've done for those.
Yeah.
Some of the ones around here, I modified the heatsink to be able to disperse more heat, but didn't overclock them because it's 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 75% humidity in this little sunroom where I keep the miners. So I need them to be heat resilient, but not overclocked, where in my mom's bathroom, I want them to be able to just spew as much heat as they possibly can everywhere and guess as many guesses as they can. So I think there's a way that you can run it. There's a dude in the OMB server who is known for getting a Nerd Axe up to its highest hash rate ever stably. They come stock with 4.8 terahash, which is pretty good for 4 chips. He got them over 10 terahash, like sustained for days. So he's like this legend of being able to do this. But his actual preference is to buy more Nerd Axes and dramatically underclock them because they become so much more efficient. He lives in a place where electricity is pretty expensive. So there is a solution for any person who wants to be able to do this. And mine is usually somewhere in the middle where I want to like slightly overclock it and just get a little bit more, like, I think I said this on that podcast. I want to get as many guesses in as early as possible because hash rate goes up later and each guess is worth less as time goes on. So I want the hardware to last less time, maybe expend more electricity, but make twice the guesses. That would be my default setting if I could have it.
Yeah. No, that makes a
But
lot
you
of
asked a
sense.
different question.
No. That was it. And so we talked about how it's heating the bathroom, for example, and we talked about underclocking, overclocking, what that means, how they warm up, how you need to cool them down. They've got these parts. You've been
Yeah,
tinkering. I'm running my, let's say, so it's set up. I'm running it. Why am I pointing at a parasite pool? What is parasite pool?
got it. Solo mining, you get the whole block. If you hit it, you get nothing if anybody else hits a block, right? Solo. Commercial or FPPS mining, like pooled, conventional pooled mining, you get whatever percentage of the hash rate you've provided to that pool, you get that percentage of the payout minus fees ish, something like that. Everybody has a different plan, but that's kind of how it is. The latter doesn't make sense for home mining, and the former was the only option for home mining for a really long time. Parasite Pool has combined a lot of unique features to be a very solid middle ground where if you hit the block, you get 1 Bitcoin and everybody else splits 2.125 Bitcoin, the remaining plus fees amongst themselves based on hash rate, kind of like an FPPS pool that's only getting the remainder after the 1 Bitcoin is pulled out and given to the miner who finds the block. Not only that, but it's all built on Lightning. So when they make these gigantic payouts to potentially thousands of different addresses, you don't eat the whole thing up in fees by making a gigantic transaction because Lightning's almost free to use. So there are no fees to Parasite Pool. You don't have to wait 100 blocks to get the payout, which is typically how Coinbase payouts work. If you mine a block and it goes directly to your address, you can't spend it for 100 blocks. I think that's the lock time on it. This avoids that because all of the money is loaded into the Lightning Network in advance of the block being mined. So the second it's mined, it just gets paid out. I don't think it's automatic. It's not the second it gets mined, but like when it gets mined,
Yeah.
they pay it out. So then you can use it in less than 100 blocks. Not that that's a huge deal, I don't think. But the Lightning part is a big deal because there are very few pools using it. And the payout structure being 1 Bitcoin to the miner who wins and 2.125 to the remainder of the miners based on hash rate is a really unique concept. And this is why I say I don't know what his long-term plans are for it, because I don't think it would make sense for commercial miners to join a pool like Parasite. And I think a lot of solo miners think that they're giving up 2.125 Bitcoin when they join Parasite, because if they hit a block, they only get one, which is a weird way to look at it because your odds of hitting a block are like astronomically low, but the odds of the pool hitting a block are much higher.
Hmm.
So you could be able to pay off your equipment and your electricity and then maybe get a Bitcoin, or you could say probably never get anything because are you going to live 20,000 years? Probably not, right? So I think Parasite fills this middle ground. I mean, the second I heard about it, I signed up for it. I pointed all my miners at it. It's this much more complicated than setting up a normal miner, but only this much. And if you're already in the weeds setting up a solo miner, like one extra copy paste and one extra wallet extension is probably not going to kill you. And did you ask earlier how you would set up a miner if you were to
Yeah,
do
let's
that?
talk about it. So no, that's fascinating with Parasite Pool. Uh, why do you think more of these pools aren't using Lightning for like distribution of payments to save on fees then? Just on that note.
It probably has something to do with Lightning channels or the technical complexities of using the Lightning network to do something like that, or maybe having to have the Bitcoin loaded into the Lightning network
Yeah.
instead of it just coming out of the Coinbase, because I don't think you can make it just go directly to Lightning, which is maybe what CTV would help it do. I'm not really an expert on that.
No,
I'm not
that's
an expert
fine.
on any of this, but um, I think it's just complicated, and it
Yeah.
could just be less complicated and you send it to Bitcoin.
Before we talk about setting it up, because I think we should do that last before we then, wrap up. But I want to know, there's a lot of talk around, and I know ZK put out info about this when Parasite came out, around like mining centralization and how something like Parasite and something like these home miners can help to decentralize mining. And obviously, we talk about this spectrum of decentralization and trustlessness and whatnot that Bitcoin's on. You know, what are the, yeah, like what's going on here? Is it an issue? Is it not an issue? Is Parasite
Yeah,
Pool, part of like perhaps like an ongoing solution if there is a problem?
when going to developer conferences, I'm not smart like that. I don't know what they're talking about, but I want to know. So I attend these things and I hear people talk about the very weird down a dark path corners of like how if you had $1 billion, you construct a transaction set that would like nuke a Bitcoin block and it would make it take forever and never clear or make them go too fast. Or there's all kinds of weird stuff you could do. None of them make any sense. You would need a country's wealth to do some of them. Why they haven't happened? Because if they were easy and they made sense, people would just do it because it's fun. That's how the internet works, right? The problem with like the hole in the armor with mining is that since it's commercial, it is doing the same thing that like Apple and Samsung do, or Amazon and Alibaba, or something like the strongest companies with the most money have the most resources to become stronger. So there are pools that have like close to, if you look at their subsidiaries and all the companies that they own, potentially close to or more than 50% of the hash rate. You could argue that if, let's say I had 59% of the hash rate of Bitcoin network and my monthly power bill was like $8 trillion and I had 400,000 miners or something, whatever, 400,000 billion or buildings full of miners. If I attack the network, I kill Bitcoin. Why would I do that? That's how I make money. I'm the single biggest moneymaker in the entire network. Why would I choose to like kamikaze attack it? That would be bananas. Which isn't to say that we shouldn't try to solve this, but it is to say that like it's probably not going to happen. It hasn't happened, and hopefully this will self-solve. If it doesn't, more people running miners in home settings, especially in cold weather, will offset their heating bill, and it will further decentralize the network because there are a larger number of people who are in control of the block template. The more random it can be, the better. It's less random if one entity is more likely to get most blocks, and it is more random if way more entities are less likely to get a block, or
Yeah.
Yeah, it's distributed. It's just more distributed. So if every single household in the world just had a BitX Gamma sitting around, we'd see a lot more solo blocks, which means we'd see a lot more solo templates, which means more people starting to control their own templates potentially, or getting into large scale mining. I don't know exactly what the path is with Parasite, but it is one more way to sucker people in, not sucker people in, attract people to being able to mine because there are fewer things wrong with it. It is more likely that you'll get some payout. And when you do win the lottery, you win a little bit less, but you're more likely to actually get something out of it. So I think it's supposed to take that segment of people who are like, why would I solo mine? I'm never going to hit a block. And why would I commercial mine? I don't have any money to do it. They're like, well, I could do this halfway thing where it's a little bit more fun because like when you do a scratch off, you want the $50, right? I might get the $50 this time, where there's no chance with solo mining and no chance with commercial mining. So it fills a middle ground gap. And if more people get into mining because of that, then it further decentralizes the network. When that becomes a meaningful number, and like at what point it becomes a meaningful number and we can call the network like sufficiently decentralized, I don't think it'll ever happen because it's always a struggle to stay more decentralized. We want that. We want to never be able to predict who is going to get the next block and thereby who's going to be able to control the next template. And currently it's a little more centralized than people would like, but it hasn't been a problem yet, as you can see, because every transaction makes it into the Bitcoin network.
Yep, yeah. Well, not everyone, but most.
Actually, they do. And this is a fun filter debate topic to have. Yeah, that you can't stop anything.
I thought that there was some, like the transactions have to be valid in there. So there's like, I remember I listened to a podcast with Charlie. We don't have to get into it.
Within consensus.
Within consensus. Correct. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Of course. So as long as it's, I will say this, I'll say every consensus valid transaction that is not illegal by the rules of Bitcoin network makes it into the Bitcoin network blocks somehow, because someone is willing to take the money to do it. That's the point. The point is not for someone to develop some moral disposition that they think that this should or shouldn't happen, so they're deciding not to put it in Bitcoin block. If we can do that with Bitcoin, then Bitcoin's not Bitcoin. And we don't want to deal with a Bitcoin that's not Bitcoin, in my opinion. That's my girlfriend. Hi, everybody.
Hey. Bitterfina, give her a follow. It's 100%. I agree. We don't even need to talk about it. It's like freedom to transact, and it's like you can't pick and choose. Yeah. Like, oh, what was that? Was that transaction legal or illegal? Did I like what that transaction was used for?
Bitcoin's a major religion now, and it's going to develop zealot factions that it already has. I mean, Bitcoin Cash and BSV are zealot factions of Bitcoin.
Correct.
Litecoin was an experiment, and Dogecoin was a joke. But what's happening now, if there is a fork that comes from this, it'll be a zealot faction of Bitcoin that has a moral structure associated with it and different viewpoints than the currently accepted version of Bitcoin. It's not a bad thing. I think it's natural, but it's annoying, and I don't like fighting.
Yeah, no, I think that's the key point. I actually think it's healthy that there's different viewpoints, different mindsets and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's just the way in which things are communicated. And like you said.
And Bitcoin clients. I mean, it's good to have both knots and Bitcoin Core and knobs, if that's a real thing. I saw that floating around. I don't know what it is. The more Bitcoin clients we have, even if they have different like mempool policies or whatever, that's good. We want a diversity of things to choose from because it's further decentralized that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So yeah, I like that you touched on that point. So home mining is in its very early stages, or perhaps will always be, in regards to like decentralizing mining. More nodes decentralizes the network more. It
started at home.
Yeah.
And then it made it to data centers slowly, and now it's only in data centers. So there's this push for home mining is just to get it back to the hands of the people.
You could and you used to be able to do it from your mobile phone, supposedly like really early. There was like an app, and then it didn't last very long. I don't know enough details about it. And I was listening to a podcast, I think it was with Charlie, but with a few people. Like even Laszlo, the pizza guy, he was the one who sort of started figuring out this larger scale mining, and then Satoshi was like, whoa, we're not quite ready for that. Like
he brought up the GPU.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and he didn't like mistakenly spend 20,000 Bitcoin on pizza. He intentionally spent 80,000 Bitcoin on pizza.
Yeah.
He was like, order me a pizza, I'll send you X amount of Bitcoin. That's more money than this, just to get like Bitcoin into people's hands. What a guy. Not even because of that, just because like his attitude is cool. He's like doing things because it's cool and fun for the network and gets people involved, not because he's like trying to like mass hoard wealth and never spend it, yell at people on the internet,
Yeah, I love that.
What they do.
That's part of the pizza law that a lot of people don't realize, and how Satoshi was actually in touch with Laszlo. Laszlo was one of the OG Bitcoiners as well,
Yeah,
and it was like, well, like we need this to be a bit more distributed. The network's probably not ready for this, and then I think people think you're speculating. It might have been a little bit of penance, like I'm gonna just like distribute some of this Bitcoin that I got through figuring out GPU, like, and I
because
get
he
some
amassed a
pizza.
lot of Bitcoin
He
because of it.
did
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah.
if he didn't do it, somebody else would, and if nobody
Exactly.
figured out ASIC mining, somebody would have after that. It's like it's the natural progression of it. I'm glad it was him of all people, Like if it was somebody worse who did it and then had a data center available, blew through tons of blocks and just
Who
pocketed the
knows if we'd
Bitcoin
be
and then
where we're
fell
at
asleep
now?
on it. I don't know. Like it's just that just feels like a shittier story to me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
don't
you
even know
never
if it
know
would
what
be
would have happened
damaging to
after
the
that.
network though. Like I don't even think that if you fired up a quantum computer and you attacked all 32,000 Satoshi addresses, because like what people don't realize, I think, about the Satoshi coins, we don't know that they're those, by the way. We're assuming that this pocket of addresses is Satoshi's Bitcoin, and it's in like tens of thousands of addresses. It's 50 Bitcoin apiece because every time you mined a block, it went to a new address, right? It's not like there's Satoshi's coins and you can attack that address and get millions of Bitcoin. You would have to point a quantum computer at an address one at a time, which we can't do that right now. But even when we can, you'd have to do it one at a time and unlock these 50 Bitcoin incrementally. And like, what does that mean? The price goes down a little? People sell Bitcoin? Like, what isn't that what Bitcoin's for? Like, how is that dangerous? It just doesn't. None of these like weird scenarios feel dangerous to me. So if there is some guy out there who did do a Laszlo thing and he got hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, cool, sell it, whatever. Goes down for a few days or a few years, and then it's still Bitcoin at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was a little bit tongue in cheek. It would have been interesting to see, would it have affected the course of it in some way? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe if there was a big flood on the market and nobody wanted to mine because Bitcoin wasn't worth enough. So then security went down and somebody was able to 51% attack it or something like that. But this feels like a self-solving problem to me
For
because if it's
sure.
worth defending, people will defend it. Um, but people love to say what if and get into like tail emissions and security budget
Yeah.
stuff. That's one of the things with the halving. The halving goes on for like 120 more years,
Hmm.
after which point there's no more block reward. And a lot of the ifs and buts in Bitcoin discussions, when in between all the very big arguments, people default back to arguing about whether or not we need to create new coins to then give to miners, like basically fabricate a new block reward and increase the supply of Bitcoin so that Bitcoin is alive in 120 years, which like how could you ever even plan for 10 years ahead, let alone 120? Like America's going to be Japan, and South America is going to be a desert entirely, and like there's going to be ice caps on the equator. Like, who knows what's going to happen in 120 years? What are we worrying about tail emissions for?
Mm.
It seems like it's one of those absurd problems I just get fired up about.
No, so do I. It is crazy to think, but people will always kind of try and be alarmist, or typically for some reason. And you've got all these miners going, so you're obviously like in the weeds. You love it. You've been tinkering. What
I
if
do.
it's just like I've got mine at home? Like how do I set it up? What do I do? Like what's like the sort of like set and forget type thing? Like why would I do it? Like and then yeah, can you see it scaling? Can you see more people just like setting up a
Yeah.
miner? Yeah.
I think I was at a BitDevs meetup the other day, and somebody was like, this would probably get more traction if we just called it the lottery.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be mining. It doesn't have to be Bitcoin. Nobody has to know what they're doing. Just buy a miner, plug it in. Doesn't have to say BitAxe. It doesn't have to be this like necessarily a move. I mean, it is attractive to some people that it is a movement. They're joining in
Mhm.
for an ideological purpose. But in order to get most people in, I think it just has to be called the lottery. And you can sell mining hardware that people win the lottery from, and then everybody would just plug one in. If it costs you a penny a day to run and $100 to buy, and you could make $350,000, you don't even care what the odds are. You just
Mhm.
would. So I think even in hot climates, people would do that. I don't think that's ideal necessarily, but what is, right? So yeah, I do think it could scale. I don't think as hobbyist stuff right now, chip production could keep up with that. And I don't think that there is any push to make normal people want to mine Bitcoin because it sounds like you have to know something to do it. Bitcoin's got a branding problem for a variety of reasons, and I don't think it's up to anybody to solve that. Eventually, it just will come around. But if you want to plug one in at home, you just have to power it. You plug this into the wall, and then it turns on and it broadcasts its own Wi-Fi signal. You take a device of yours that is on the same network, like your phone or your laptop, and you navigate to that Wi-Fi signal. And it would say something like BitAx 8294 or something, has its own unique identifier. You go to that Wi-Fi, and you log into it, and then it'll pop up a settings page where you put in your Wi-Fi credentials so that it knows that it can jump on your Wi-Fi. So you talk to this through its Wi-Fi to tell it how to get on your Wi-Fi, and then you input a pool and an address. So the pool to give you the template, and the address that it should spit the Bitcoin out to should you win. This is traditional solo mining that I'm talking about. And then when you hit save and restart, it stops broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal, and now it's talking to your Wi-Fi and it's mining. End of story. That's it. You plug it into the wall and you tell it what to do, and it does it. In order to log into Parasite or to connect to Parasite, you would have to download an Xverse browser extension, go to the Parasite space, which is like parasite.space or something like that. And there's another website for it. Check out OMB, check out ZK's Substack. All the details are in there. But it's still in beta right now, so it's not like being widely talked about how to connect to it. But if you wanted to, you'd have to get an Xverse extension in a browser, connect it to the Parasite website, and generate a Lightning address. And then instead of putting your layer 1 Bitcoin address into the like payout field in the miner, you do your layer 1 address, the name of your miner, whatever you like, DonnyMiner.com, whatever, and then followed by the Lightning address. And now all of that stuff is where it's supposed to be. So it's not like a longer process. It's just like one more copy paste and a browser extension.
Yeah. So it's really
worth
simple.
it, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's really easy.
And you've talked about noise. You know, you sound like you've got a noisier setup than perhaps me just plugging this in.
It's almost dead silent. Yours is way noisier. And the reason for that is that your tiny fan has to run way faster to push any air, where these big fans are they're basically like computer case fans. Like you don't hear your computer much. It's like if you try, you can tell there's a fan in there. The fans on the bigger units are so much bigger that they don't have to move as fast to create the air they need to. So they're dead silent. And the tiny fans are they're the most annoying sound in the world, I think. And when you first turn it on, you're like, oh, you. And then it's on your desk, and like you come back to your desk the next day and you're like, a little loud. The next day after that, you're like, we got to put it in a different room. This is too much. So the tiny miners are actually like, they're falling out of style because they are no longer really relevant according to the hash rate of the network. That is when the BitX Super or the Gamma came out, hash rate was like half of what it is now, or a quarter of what it is. So in order to have an equal share in the general hash rate, or like have a shot at doing something, you kind of need like a NerdAX Q++ to really do much. And even then you're doing barely anything, but at least you're doing something substantial, like proportionately more. And it's dead quiet. And they're not super expensive. You can buy them from like PlebSource or Solo Satoshi for I think $400. If you have an OMB, it just takes a black eye OMB to get in the server. You can get like 1 to 5 free NerdAxes. So you can get $2,000 worth of NerdAxes, probably. Or maybe that's only people who have like large holdings. I don't know. I don't know who's applicable, but you can get a free one at least, and then you can run it. Also just have cool art that you like, you know. I'm not here to pitch that. I'm just saying that's you can do it. You don't have to. You may.
Yeah, no, totally. And it is cool to see a project, you know, shout out to ZK, and I think, you know, despite just to be like pushing this narrative which feels relevant and pertinent for Bitcoin and the decentralization of mining, and just more people being involved, and you know, even Ordinals, like Ordinals got Bitcoin, so many more just Bitcoin into so many more people's hands. So it's like, that's been really interesting. More Bitcoin in more people's hands is a good thing. More nodes
I'm one of
running.
those people. I didn't care at all until Ordinals came around, and now I'm obsessed.
Do you run a node?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got Bitcoin, you run a node, and you're mining.
But I run a node so that I can connect Sparrow directly to it, and I can send basically directly to the network. I can talk to Bitcoin instead of having to go through somebody else's servers. So reducing the number of dependencies between me and my goals was the point of this. Also, I like the idea, like if you pin things to IPFS, because like let's say you like grifters on Ethereum, probably want to partake in pinning those images to IPFS so that they're always available. Even if everybody else shuts their laptops and they're no longer pinning them, yours is still open pinning it. And then that means you can shut it and other people will still have it pinned. Much the same, a Bitcoin full node, instead of pinning some items to the Bitcoin network, pins everything that has ever been done in the history of Bitcoin all on one hard drive. And still, it's only 750 gigabytes. So it's not going to hit 2 terabytes until I think the minimum amount of time it would take is 6 years from now. And by then, 10 terabyte hard drives will be common.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's ever going to be inaccessible to run a node. I use an Umbrel, which is like $500, but it's a little tiny server. And you can use it like a server, but I just use it as an Umbrel node. And there are various apps you can download to be able to interact with your home network, even from outside your home network. So like if I go to Hong Kong for a conference and a miner goes down, I can dial into an app on my phone, get into my home network, reset the miner, and take care of whatever problems there are. Or I can use my Sparrow, or I can use Sparrow from my laptop in Hong Kong through my home node. So there's a lot of weird stuff you can do with it. Most of it's power user stuff, but at very least, you're also duplicating the network and helping back it up. So if you like your JPEGs, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you want to help store them?
Yeah, and it's
That's my view.
I agree, and it's fascinating that you say that because you alluded to it before. It's like if somebody sees the value in something, they're going to try and keep it alive. And so, if you see the value in your JPEGs, running a node makes sense. It's like people.
Yeah, most people still don't. I don't
Yeah.
think. But it doesn't mean there's not a lot of nodes. There's still a ton of nodes.
Yeah.
But I think there was a huge rush of people running nodes during the runes launch because they somehow thought that they were going to be able to mint runes better.
Yeah, that
if
was
they
a
had a
false
node.
narrative.
It was a false narrative. It would have been true if Luminex went down. If nobody had tooling or software, third-party software to use, and they needed to use the org command line to send runes mints or etches or whatever, then it would have been a big deal, probably. But like, also, no one's going to be able to do that. Nobody knows how to use the command line. It's not like you're not going to learn that. It's like trying to learn the violin to play in an orchestra next week when you've never played the violin before. Like, you're not going to do it under pressure. You're going to screw it up. You lose Bitcoin. I don't know. It wasn't a false narrative. It was just maybe a little misguided. There were more, like I'm running a node because Ordinal started. So
Yeah.
I'm one of those people and I'm still doing it. And when that breaks, I'll buy a new one.
Yeah.
I think it's valuable.
Yeah. Donny, this has been an awesome chat. Is there anything that I haven't asked specifically about mining, home mining, large scale mining? That
No, I guess
I think we've talked about a lot.
the only thing I would say is if you're going to overclock and try to because half the fun of this for me was tinkering. I really like to get this thing and pull it apart and find out what its weaknesses are, try to turn it up too far, see what breaks. It's not necessarily worth it. It is worth it if you don't break anything and you modify carefully and thoughtfully and you've done research and it's in an educated way. You can increase the amount of hash power you have for less money per hash. So like you can buy a NerdAxe for $400 and then for an extra 100, you can increase the power by 50%. So you're getting $200 worth of value for $100.
Mm-hmm.
That's worth it. But you can also burn your house down. You can blow fuses. You can melt parts of the board. You can piss people off because it's louder. I don't know. There's a ton of things that can go wrong. Most of these things, as you buy them out of the box, operate really well, optimally, I think. And you don't really have to do anything. So if you buy a NerdAxe, it's going to put out 4.8 terahash. Yeah, you can push it to 6.1 and maybe higher. But should you? Kind of no. Do it. It's fun. Replace the heatsink. That's easy. And you can't really screw that up. You can screw it up, but the worst thing that can happen is it overheats, goes into protection mode, put new thermal paste on, you attach it better, and now you have a thing that's more capable of running in high heat scenarios, maybe. So a lot of the draw for me was messing around with it, but I spent way more money messing around with these than was ever worth it, except that I learned about them a lot. So now I can diagnose problems and I can fix them. And I guess I could modify them, but I spent so much money doing it too. Just plug it in.
Plug it in and enjoy. But, in saying that, you enjoy it. It's a hobby. People like learning. You can get an OMB, like you said, and join the server, hopefully. And
I just didn't mean to say that people, if they buy it, they have to be a tinkerer.
No.
You don't
No,
at
no,
all.
no.
You can just buy it and plug it in. That works better. than almost anything you'll do to it, unless you're like an insano tinkerer and you want to do it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
no, that's fine. I was gonna say like where like somebody gets a home miner, somebody gets a Nerd QX or one of the models. How do they, where's the best place for them to learn? Who can they connect with, or where are the communities to talk about this stuff and diagnose
No,
problems and learn more outside of the OMB server, for example?
that's the problem. The OMB server is the best place for it, in my
Hmm.
opinion. Twitter is a great resource because there's people all over it, but you'd have to follow mining accounts, solo mining accounts specifically, like Solo Satoshi and PlebSource.
Hmm.
But even then, you're not going to get the 4chan Reddit version. You're getting like the commercial version. You're getting the like, we produce these and here's what we can publicly condone.
Yeah.
You're not getting the people who are setting them on fire, plugging them into the wrong voltage, it, it, investigating parts on Amazon that are not made for this but work better than some of the parts that are produced by commercially available entities. Um, so like the OMB server is the best place to do it.
Hmm.
But if you had to do a runner up, I say it's just Twitter and follow a bunch of accounts and follow the trails of people who comment, look at their pages, see what they've done. There's a lot of valuable information out there. But everything the most robust resource is the OMB Parasite channel, which I think might be opening up to the public in whatever next phase Parasite has going on when it goes out of beta into like public live. But don't quote me on that because I don't know. I heard it.
Yeah.
Nobody told me that.
No, totally. Well, Donny, this has been an awesome chat. I've learnt a lot. You've clarified a lot. I think doing these Eli 5 sort of noob versions of these more technical discussions is super important. The Ordinals community, the more we know, the more empowered you are. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
Of course, man. Anytime you want to just get on the phone and talk about this, and you can record it if you want. I'm happy to talk always. And I'm
We'll
sure
chat
I
again.
said stuff that's not true, just as a final disclaimer, because I feel like I have to say this all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm always wrong about everything I think. 6 months later, I'm to find out that I was wrong about something. So I'm sure I said some things that were incorrect here, and I'm sorry if I did that. If anybody at home is screaming that I did said something inaccurate, bound to happen.
Well, well, I'm sure that everyone got a lot out of it. This is going to get published. So for the people who tuned in while this was live, thank you so much. And for those who listen, we hope that you learnt a lot. And yeah, this was Brett from Gamma and Donny, CEO of Emojis and Ordinals enthusiast, home miner enthusiast. What else could I call you?
Uh, Donnie, I don't know. It's been nice being
Sweet, Donny.
Donnie. Thanks, Brett, for
Thanks,
having
Donny.
me.
Peace
And
out.
I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.